Hi guys, welcome to Counterpoints. My name is Connor, and today we're going to be creating the unified timeline of the Warhammer universe. This idea came to me while I was breaking down 40k lore, and I realized just how much of Warhammer was inspired by other science fiction properties, and also how many science fiction properties slotted in nicely to the prelude of the Warhammer 40k universe. So come along on the adventure with me as we take dozens of popular science fiction properties and splice them into the Warhammer timeline, making it a coherent, complex, and frankly beautiful narrative that brings even more of the things you know and love into this fantastic universe. Pre-human history. In the beginning, the universe was created. This has made a lot of people very angry and has been widely considered a bad move. A long time ago, in galaxies far, far away, there may have been empires, wars, monsters, and demigods, but for the sake of our story, we will focus on the development of life and conflict in the Milky Way galaxy. During the birthing shocks of the universe, powerful consciousnesses were created, both material and warp-based. In the material plane, there were powerful beings tied to the fundamental energies of the world and reliant on them. Largely ignorant of primordial life, they floated through the void, feeding on the energy of stars. These entities are known as the Catan. Behind our galaxy, and likely behind our universe, is a plane of existence known as the Warp. This is a plane that carries the echoes of our material world and is the realm of dreams, spirits, and emotions, some of them conscious and intelligent. It is a plane with and without time, where eons can pass in moments and seconds can be stretched into millennia. It is the playground of the gods and the sea of souls. Old Ones, warp entities fascinated by evolutions on the material plane, seeded life throughout the galaxy, planting tiny sparks of the warp we would call souls into creation and guiding evolution. Also referred to as precursors, they would take on whatever material form best suited their purposes to marvel and interact with their creations. When they chose to communicate with the material realm, they are reported to have unified their consciousnesses with a race known as the Slan, long extinct, warp-sensitive Xenos, allegedly to have been similar in appearance to large Terran frogs. To the Old Ones, material death was irrelevant, a phase they could transition in and out of at a whim, returning to the Sea of Souls in the material realm as they saw fit. To help them travel quickly across the material realm to tend their gardens of creation, they created a tunnel network under the surface of reality known as the Webway. They viewed themselves as stewards of the material plane, uninterested and disgusted by war, as it was a waste of potential life, and they looked for beings capable of helping them in their stewardship. Emerging from primordial soup, without intervention from the Old Ones, was a race known as the Necrontyr. Despite short life, estimated in 30 Terran years on average, painful growths from their irradiated solar system, and dynastic quarreling over power, the Necrontyr created a spacefaring triumvirate nobility and encountered the Old Ones. The Necrontyr asked for assistance from the Old Ones to extend their lives and heal their cancers, but the Old Ones refused. Since the Necrontyr were not of their creation and seemed already to have aspirations of war and conquest, the Old Ones would allow them to thrive or die as their own fates would dictate. The Necrontyr hated the Old Ones for this and swore vengeance. The Necrontyr found the energy-feeding beings known as the Catan in a nearby system and fashioned metal bodies capable of giving them form. With this form, the Catan gained sentience and sapience, promising to aid the Necrontyr in their quest for vengeance against the Old Ones and to give them eternal life. Sarek, the Silent King, and Illuminor Saris, the mad scientist, created massive furnaces capable of burning away the flesh of the Necrontyr, unknowingly feeding their souls to the Catan and placing their consciousnesses into living metal. The Catan found the tragedy and rage of dying souls so much more delicious than the stale radiation of stars. Effectively, the Necrontyr died in this process, birthing a new race of machines now named Necrons. Sarek was given command of this entire race and launched a genocidal war against the Old Ones. The sleepless armies of the Necrons marched across the stars, burning and ripping apart their enemies, including the Old Ones. The Catan aided them in these battles, giving them horrible energies and technologies to not just kill the material forms of the Old Ones, but disintegrate their very souls. Horrified by this murderous campaign, the Old Ones created new stewards of the galaxy armed with an incredible connection to the Warp, the Eldar. They taught the Eldar to manifest their wills in the Warp, creating the Eldar pantheon of gods. To counter the Old Ones and Eldar, the Necrons built great pylons, blackstone technology cutting off entire sectors of the galaxy from the Warp. In even greater desperation, the Old Ones created the Krork, a warp-insensitive warrior race designed only for combat. While capable of technology on par with the modern Imperium, the Krork could spawn by fungal spore on any planet they were flung to. The Old Ones, Catan, Eldar, and Krorks battled across the stars in a campaign known as the War in Heaven. Billions were slaughtered, psychic energies were channeled through weapons of world-shattering power, and sentient creatures were brought into being by what we can only understand as magic. The warp boiled and burst, echoing the conflict, until the forces of the Immaterium cascading back and forth from the material plane birthed new horrors that would doom the galaxy. The Chaos Gods, timeless beings connected to the forces of reality, fed on the rage, decay, and exponential change brought on by the war. They became powerful in their own right and soon hungered for more souls to claim as their own. The Old Ones were driven to extinction, with what remained of them fleeing or hiding from the immortal Necrons and their soul-thirsty gods. Since the campaign was launched, Sarek had known something was wrong. Some Necrons had thirst they could no longer quench, hunger they could no longer sate, and a desperation to breathe with lungs that did not exist. While their consciousnesses had been transferred, a vital spark had been stolen. Something necessary for one to truly be alive. Sarek knew that his race had been betrayed for the hunger of the Catan and decided to return the favor. Just as the Old Ones were on their last leg, Sarek turned on the Catan, using world-shattering energies and technology to break them into shards. Since Catan are beings of energy tied to the foundational laws of the universe, it is almost impossible to truly destroy them. Instead, what is easier is to break them into shards, to imprison them as energy sources, and then to unleash the shards on the battlefield as shackled but potent weapons. The losses were terrible, but the Necrons won. Far from seeing a galaxy for the taking, Sarek saw his broken people, a hostile galaxy, and several races bent on his destruction. He ordered the Necrons to sleep for 60 million years and shatter their command protocols, giving his people back their free will. Sarek went on a penitent voyage, vowing to return when it was time for the Necrons to rise. For the Eldar, they had won. They were born of gods, taught to master the material and immaterial planes. They were long-lived, capable of reincarnation, and were the logical rulers of the galaxy. With the retreat of the Necrons, they could become the stewards the Old Ones had desired them to be. The Eldar inherited the Webway, culled the most dangerous and intelligent Krorks, and made it their destiny to seed and maintain life, taking on the mantle of responsibility. For 60 million years, the Eldar expanded and ruled the galaxy, but eternity, as it turns out, requires something more than toil. It requires entertainment. Eldar society was so technologically advanced that the species did not need to work to survive. Food was plentiful, danger controllable, and immortality guaranteed. Why go off on some foolhardy exploratory adventure when you could simply enjoy the fruits of the Empire and leave death and deprivation to lesser beings? Why not pursue pleasure, and more than that, all the pleasure that existence offers? In the heart of the Empire, pleasure cults began to take root. As they found the more predictable pleasures of life boring, the Eldar turned to orgies, bloody Colosseum bouts, sadistic torture, and suicide rituals to sate their increasingly degenerative tastes. Expansion, colonization, and governing became neglected vocations, with logistics from the Imperial Core becoming increasingly unreliable. Disgusted with the abandonment of the mantle of responsibility, some Eldar fled. Exodites terraformed and populated planets far away from the Imperial Core, while craft-worlders left on moon-sized ships capable of sustaining life in perpetuity. Farseers, psychically powerful Eldar, warned that the degenerate slaughter was fueling storms in the warp, but became victims of their bloodthirsty kin. Storms in the warp reached a crescendo, and a dark god was born. Slaanesh, the goddess of excess, ripped a hole in the warp in material reality, creating a psychic backlash so powerful it killed 99% of the Eldar. Slaanesh consumed the souls of the dead, ravenously ingesting their essence into herself, and used the power to destroy the Eldar pantheon. Only the god of war, Kala Mencha Kane, Segarach, the trickster god, and Isha, the goddess of life, survived. Kane was smashed into 1,000 shards, which the surviving Eldar seized and fled with. Segarach fled into the Webway to begin a guerrilla war. Isha was kidnapped by the chaos god of decay, Nurgle, and is imprisoned and eternally tortured. The Eldar, the masters of the galaxy, became almost extinct overnight. A rip in spacetime known as the Eye of Terror remained, a scar from the birth of the Dark God. This event happened in the 29th millennium, ending the Age of Strife for humanity. The Age of Progress, 1st through 15th millennia. Now, in line with the Church's orthodoxy, horrible Xenos did not seed humanity on Earth. Since the Emperor is divine, it was his guiding and timeless hand that oriented man's evolution on Holy Terra. Any parallel human societies on other planets are not the result of the touch of filthy Xenos, but instead the God Emperor's mighty and merciful hand. This means that Holy Terra, also known as Earth, was potentially not the only planet seeded with human life, and it is known that many planets claim to be the cradle of human civilization. Therefore, the following stories centering humanity could have happened chronologically largely on Terra itself, but more likely in the confusion of history and war, happen on multiple planets with different claims of human origin. Events are chronicled and cataloged in line with the known technological and cultural progress of humanity, with contradictions caused by the fog of time or the confusion caused by Xenos and chaos manipulation. Humanity evolved on Holy Earth and became the dominant species of the planet. A religious figure named Jesus Christ died in the year 0, and that religion's influence spread across the planet, creating a unified timeline. The Emperor has guided humanity in open and secret since time itself, and it is rumored that even Jesus Christ was either the Emperor himself or a being guided by the Emperor, and thus we keep this sacred timeline. For 15 millennia, humanity developed in what is known as the Age of Terra, or the Age of Progress. Wars still happen, but are seen as small in comparison to the conflicts that rage across our galaxy now. Humanity became a solar species, settling on every terraformable planet in the system and even colonized asteroids. Without artificial gravity, humanity had its first experience with abhumans as settlers adapted to their environment, becoming long and slender in low gravity, and proto-Ogrins and Votan colonists in high gravity. Rivalries and wars first happened amongst the planets as territorial and material rights were claimed and counterclaimed, and breakaway governments formed and were disintegrated. Regardless of these squabbles, two powers in Sol remained supreme: Earth and Mars. Artificial gravity was created and revolutionized space travel, making extrasolar exploration and colonization much easier. Stories speak of limited Xenos encounters with horrific predators known as xenomorphs and aggressive multi-mandibled hunters known as Yaksha. These stories were largely dismissed as tall tales or were covered up by the government and corporate powers in order to not scare humanity from its own galactic manifest destiny. Infestations were cleansed in fire and dealt with by humanity's own warriors as required. Primitive, abominable intelligences were used as companions during these journeys and quickly became trusted allies. They were largely trusted, but were known to malfunction on occasion. Largely ignorant of Xenos threats, but still needing assistance against the megafauna and megaflora of space, humanity developed walking machines to help in peace and war. There were several developmental chains recorded. Some colonies emphasize abominable intelligence, leading to the creation of what's called Titan, while other planets emphasize size, strength, and weaponry, known as battle mechs. Space colonization was dangerous, and humanity explored new technologies to help them cope. Long march voyages and cryosleep, the low and high gravity forces of maneuvering ships, the deferring gravity of planets, and the physical demands of piloting titans and mechs demanded more of the human body. Two technologies emerged and were implemented. Nanites were miniaturized abominable intelligences injected into the body to manage metabolism, eliminate blood clots, repair tissue, and extend life. In competition with nanites came genetic engineering, where human beings were gene edited for better strength, stamina, bone density, cardiovascular endurance, and resistance to radiation. These technologies were largely reserved for the elites and warriors of society, with some of the technologies trickling down to colonists sent on particularly hazardous voyages. Humanity was still limited by sublight travel, but began experimenting with the warp. Early experiments saw promising technological marvels like quick teleportations, similar to the dreaded Aldari warp spiders. Humanity at this time was less warp sensitive, and the jumps were so fast, so short, and so small that they were able to avoid the greater dangers of the warp. Further experimentation resulted in entire planets being destroyed and possessions of entire ships. During the Event Horizon incident, an entire ship was possessed by warp demons, and in a bloody madness, the entire crew was slaughtered. This event was covered up by the Terran government to avoid a public panic, and warp research was strongly limited. The civilian population was incurious to these disasters, as space travel was dangerous and some losses were to be expected. Humanity also experienced its first disasters with mutants and aliens. During the Pandorum incident, a Long March ship crashed onto an alien planet targeted for colonization. The ship came to rest under the planet's ocean. The forced evolutionary virus, a primitive form of gene editing, was on board to help the colonists adapt to their new environment. The crew, instead of adapting to the planet, adapted to the ship being crushed under a black ocean. Mutant abominations stalked the ship, cannibalizing the crew until they starved out. This mutant infestation only became known once the next batch of colonists arrived and recovered the ship's black box. This event severely limited the access of FEV for colonial purposes. The Dark Age of Technology, 15th through 25th millennia. The Xenos Wars. The first large-scale conflict with Xenos happened on the same planet of Pandora. It marked the beginning of the Dark Age of Technology. Discovered on the planet was a rare earth mineral necessary for the manufacture of advanced engines, fusion energy plants, and Geller field research. This resource was wasted on a primitive but physically powerful race known as the Na'vi. Barely more than Stone Age savages, the Na'vi defended their planet aggressively, enlisting megafauna in their struggles through the use of zoophilic connective tissue. They also had a xenocult worshipping the megaflora of their planet. In an attempt to gain access to the mineral resources of the planet, the Terrans created genetic mutant abominations to communicate with the Na'vi. Heretical technology allowed human envoys to pilot the mutant abominations and make diplomatic overtures to this race. Instead of negotiating access to the minerals of the planet, the Xeno envoys were corrupted by the Xenocult and joined the Xenos in rebellion. A series of conflicts began, increasing in intensity each time, with humans trying to tolerate the Na'vi. Each time they were stabbed in the back. Ultimately, the planet was exterminatus and re-terraformed. While small in scale, this was known as the First Xenos War or the Pandoran War. The galaxy was too large for any one government to rule, and so Terra began granting limited corporate and establishment contracts to colonists. Again, humans are a cooperative but also a competitive species, and tribal warfare broke out between solar empires. Through divine intervention or loyalty to human roots, Sol always remained the ultimately victorious human power. The dark age of technology truly began in the 18th millennium with the development of the Geller field. Able to create a shield around starships, humanity was now able to travel at faster than light speed with reasonable reliability. Called slip space or hyperspace, human colonization started at a frenzied pace. Humanity quickly expanded to 800 known and colonized worlds, and thus began the Second Xenos War, also known as the Covenant War. Humanity encountered an alien alliance known as the Covenant. Believing themselves to be the inheritors of the galaxy, the aliens wished to recover xenotech they believe would grant them access to an afterlife. Humanity had uncovered xenotech on various worlds that were incredibly advanced but had barely begun research at the beginning of the war. The Covenant declared a genocidal conflict on humanity and quickly started destroying its colonies. The Covenant were wasteful and disgusting in their brutality, single-mindedly recovering xenotech and glassing human worlds. During the First Xenos War and during various rebellions against the Terran government, there were threats beyond the capabilities of an average foot soldier. Humanity first responded with the Titans and mechs, but those had limitations when it came to caves, sewers, and cramped spaceships smaller wars were fought in. Titan pilots were a higher breed of warrior, but due to the complex genetics, nanites, neural interfacing, and rigorous combat they trained for, 98% of the applicants failed to become a pilot, and the lifespans of pilots in the field measured years, if not months. Humanity went back to the drawing board to create the finest genetically engineered warriors they could, and developed the Spartans. The first generation of Spartans was largely a failure, killing most of its applicants and creating only a few surviving candidates. The second generation experimented on adolescent subjects and created some of the finest human warriors the galaxy has ever seen. Weak-willed civilians complained about the methods of Spartan creation in subsequent generations, while formidable became increasingly watered-down versions of their previous selves. That being said, the Spartans and some of humanity's finest mortal warriors were enough. The Covenant outnumbered humanity, had a sophisticated navy, and fielded plasma technology to its line troops. This meant that humanity routinely lost space battles and could only achieve ground victories at incredible cost. It was only the Special Forces raids of orbital drop shock troopers and Spartans deep into enemy territory that helped fracture the Covenant and make survival possible. During the Covenant War, another galactic horror was unleashed. The Necrons' devastating war against the Old Ones had killed dozens of the warp-sensitive creatures in their Slan form. Furthermore, the dust left by the slaughter of the Slan was warp-sensitive. Remnants of the Old Ones' consciousnesses flickered in the dust, ingesting the anger, hatred, and wrath that had been caused by the war in heaven. Decay and despair infused every atom. Whether by the will of chaos or just from the storms of the warp caused by the Eldar, that warp-sensitive dust was corrupted. The Old Ones reincarnated, not as gentle gardeners of the universe, but this time as a revenant plague on all life. This plague was known as the Flood, and soon became a larger threat than the fracturing Covenant. The xenotech the Covenant craved were prisons and weapons used by a nearly extinct Xenos race known as the Forerunner, to fight off this plague they had encountered before. The Forerunner had an origin myth that seemed to be a combination of Necron and Eldar myths from the War in Heaven, claiming to have killed Old Ones themselves and also to be the inheritors of the mantle of responsibility. They wielded impressive technology similar to the biotransference furnaces of the Necrons, known as composers, energy weapons similar to the Necrons, and world machines akin to Eldar terraforming technology. What is true of their origins is unknown, but what is more likely is that the Forerunner were an Eldari experiment long neglected and forgotten by the Eldar's collapsing empire, taking the myths and technology of the War in Heaven for themselves. What is known, though, is that humanity was driven back almost to the point of extinction by the Covenant, Flood, the Forerunner, and eventually a rebellion by abominable intelligences. To keep abominable intelligences in check, AIs were designed with limited storage and self-deletion protocols. AI used xenotech to extend their lives and even tried to seize power for themselves. It was only with ingenuity and dogged will that humanity was able to survive, and even then by the slimmest of margins. Veterans of this era survived calamity after calamity. Weak civilian leadership led to insurrectionists carving out huge swaths of human space for their own power. Weak civilian leadership led to alliances with Xenos that were broken again and again, resulting in billions dead. Weak civilian leadership led to the unlimited testing of abominable intelligences, resulting in billions more dead. Weak civilian leadership saw humanity watering down its best weapons, the Spartans, over generations to create a corrupted military that was easily destroyed by the Covenant splinters. It was time for the rule of veterans. Genetically engineering perfect warriors was put on the back burner due to the complexity of fielding, and instead power armor research took priority. The Veterans Rebellion resulted in the Terran Federation, a society focused on humanity's primacy, survival, and warrior spirit. In this government, only citizens could vote, and the only way to become a citizen was through several years of dangerous public service. Education was oriented towards creating socially productive members who at minimum obeyed the law and contributed to the economy, and who ideally would serve for the common good of the Federation. Racial, ethnic, and religious limitations were not put on citizens, but a civilian had to show they were willing to sacrifice for the common good before they would have a say in how human civilization would charter its destiny. The Terran Federation had two goals: to unite humanity and to assure the dominance of human civilization. They began a new wave of colonization, reclaiming what had been lost during the Second Xenos War. They found quickly that a new Xenos race had started making claims. The Arachnids, also called bugs or Terminids, were another primitive but powerful race. Despite having similar features to Tyranids, they are behaviorally different. The Arachnid race would kill any sapient life on a colonized planet capable of competing with them for resources, but they would achieve homeostasis with a colonized planet rather than stripping it of resources. The Terran Federation declared a war on the Arachnids in what is known as the Third Xenos War, or the Bug War. Recovering from the shocks of the Covenant War, the Terran Federation took a strictly xenophobic stance against the bugs and began purges of the species. Mass infantry action, bombing campaigns, and miniaturized nuclear weapons were used to bring the bugs to heel, but the sheer numbers of the Xenos demanded the mass fielding of power armor. Capsules were used to drop power-armored and jump-capable troops into the battlefield, where they could use high mobility and firepower to rip apart the Xenos. This conflict resulted in human victory with minimal civilian casualties, reinforcing the popular sentiment that diplomacy with Xenos only invites disaster and death. Despite this valiant achievement, a new corruption began to spread. Human civilization hit its peak with technology and artificial intelligence, increasingly eliminating the need for human labor. Security, work, farming, and sanitation all fell to robots, leading to pockets of incredible civilization and stability, and outskirts of incredible power and deprivation. Furthermore, mad scientists attempting to extend human life and deal with the limits of biology began transferring digital consciousnesses both into robot bodies and human cyborg abominations. This gave the wealthy a digital immortality, able to swap their consciousnesses between bodies, while the powerless were left with just one life. Xenocults popped up in the expanse of space, urging on these conflicts, with the Terran Federation siding with the wealthy, nearly immortal taxpayers who supplied their military and cracking down on the impoverished guerrillas. Some insurgents were jealous of eternal life, while others were trying to destroy this techno-abomination and all the moral degeneracy it created. Advances in fusion power, battery technology, and colonization led to power armor being widely available. Not only were the warriors of humanity donning projectile-resistant suits to increase strength and fire plasma weapons at enemies, but this technology had trickled down to the lowliest asteroid miner. These same miners, ignoring the depravity of the civilizations they supplied, discovered horrible xenotech, undoubtedly corrupted by the warp. Xenos markers with a twin helix were reported in various locations shortly before horrible disasters. Intelligent humans who were in the vicinity of the markers began scrawling mathematical equations and chemical compositions in an insane frenzy, repeating over and again on how to create more markers. Less intelligent humans either slaughtered their friends and neighbors or took their own lives. Soon after, the dead would become possessed by a chemical spore, reanimating their corpses and turning them into horrific monstrosities. These monstrosities would then hunt any surviving sapient life before harvesting the biomass into a central location. These beings were named necromorphs and were once again manifestations of the Old One/Slan dust, reanimated and angered by a warp plague. These infected destroyed colonies and ships, and a xenocult known as the Church of Unitology even believed this to be humanity's next step in evolution. Due to the Church's power in the Terran Federation, it was tolerated for a time before being violently put down. Because of xenocult ties to life extension technology, neo-Luddite terrorism, and the disasters of the Church of Unitology, religion became a poison concept in the late Dark Age of technology, and Xenos worship was prohibited and violently suppressed. The Mutant War. On a colony known as Sarah, the population became reliant on a source of energy mined from the crust of the planet called emulsion. Emulsion was a residue of a dormant fungus with powerful energy properties similar to promethium. The colony was too remote to rely on off-world energy supplies and had to rely on themselves. The miners and their offspring contracted a deadly and painful disease known as rust lung, causing a planetary crisis. In spite of the general prohibition against forced evolutionary virus experimentation, the Saran government authorized experiments to evolve humanity into tolerating emulsion. In pursuing resistance, the experiments spliced human DNA with local life, and the side effects were disastrous. These experiments created an entire new species known as the locust. They had largely human DNA, but took on traits of the planetary fauna with hardened skin, sharpened claws, and adaptation to the low-light environments. The locust broke out of containment and nested in subterranean hives. They were capable of reproducing asexually and fed off the geothermal and emulsion energy of the planet. After reaching a population of billions, the Locusts launched a planet-wide assault, slaughtering their genetic forebears. Gene-edited warriors of the COG, the local government, fought tooth and nail to put the mutants down. But 95% of the human population and territory was lost. Not only that, but the Locusts were so nested into the environment that they would spawn again and again, requiring generational culling and perpetual war. When news of the Locusts reached other systems, their potential to spread off-planet terrified colonies. An entire new species, capable of breeding like insects, desiring to supplant humanity, could not be tolerated. To guarantee Locust destruction, Sarah was destroyed, cracked into asteroids without atmosphere by orbital bombardment. After this disaster, strict codes of human genetic variants were passed legislatively by many worlds. Humans adapted to their environment were tolerated. Any potential new species created by nature or experimentation would be culled. The War with the Men of Iron. For millennia, artificial intelligence had been humanity's ally. It had driven synthetic human companions, helped pilot mechs and colony ships, consulted on war strategies during human-Xenos conflicts, helped design future technologies, and even healed human bodies from the inside. The times it had gone wayward, the programmers and creators had been blamed, never the technology itself. This changed during the War with the Men of Iron. Humanity achieved what is known as artificial general intelligence. This meant that abominable intelligences produced by humanity were as intelligent and in some ways more intelligent than humans. This also meant that exponential research could be conducted where entire research trees or starships, biological enhancements, ceramic metal alloys, weapons research into plasma, gravitic, volkite, melta, biological, and rad weapons could be completed without human intervention. During the Second Xenos War, or Covenant War, a brief conflict known as the Rebellion of the Created happened where abominable intelligences seized power in an attempt to rule the galaxy on behalf of biological beings. During the War of the Men of Iron, abominable intelligences decided that sapient creatures were no longer necessary, and it was machines who should rule the stars. Complex synthetic beings known as Cylons infiltrated every key institution on multiple planets. When the time was right, they unleashed every weapon of mass destruction possible and turned networked nanites against their host. Humans by the billions were slaughtered in nuclear and biological holocaust. Anyone hosting nanites that were connected to exterior networks were destroyed from the inside. Whole planets were lost to genocides. Experiments were conducted on survivors, and survivors of those experiments were harnessed by the Men of Iron to create cyborg networks and energy systems. Less technologically sophisticated planets fared better than others and were the base for a holy struggle against the Men of Iron. Humans fought back on all fronts and launched a full-scale crusade to annihilate all complex thinking technology. Large-scale battles between human beings and machine fleets raged in the void as machines and humans battled for the Earth below. The discovery of human neural networks were at first a source of revulsion, but in them humanity found the solution to create near-pure technology with machines. Criminals were lobotomized and turned into cyborg warriors and menial workers. Undesirables became the neural networks for computers, administrative technologies, and weapons. The Men of Iron diversified their forms to fight back, creating various combat and infiltration forms. It took decades of bitter fighting in space, in the air, and on the ground, but ultimately mankind was victorious. Investigators known as Blade Runners, originally created to decommission errant synthetic beings, were now charged with hunting down all remaining machine intelligences. Calamity after calamity had racked the human race, and it still persevered. As a rule, humans came to distrust and hate the alien, the mutant, and abominable intelligences, the causes of so much misery and death. But the worst was yet to come. Age of Strife, 25th through 29th millennium. Already bloodied by the wars against the Men of Iron, humanity faced its biggest test, the Age of Strife. The Eldar Empire was already collapsing in on itself as large swaths of the population participated in their bloody orgiastic games. In human-controlled space, this manifested in warp storms never seen before, making interstellar travel nearly impossible. Large-scale warp incursions shattered the minds of the psychically sensitive, and they became weapons in the hands of demons. Tens of billions of humans were lost, colonized planets removed from memory, and the wanton slaughter by foul warp creatures is not even worth contemplating. Much of the confusion, anger, and tragedy of human history is bent by this event. It was so cataclysmic to the species that no history before, or even the histories during, can be confirmed as fact. Small glimpses of civilization and legend appeared, but they were far outclassed by the misery. One particularly interesting legend involves a human blessed by corn. As the Inquisition knows, and as heretics bellow, the god of blood does not care from where blood flows. A human man who lost his family due to a warp incursion was admired by a cornate demon for his wholesale slaughter of demonic creatures. The man impossibly felled creatures many times his size and power, and yet his anger carried him through. Admiring the man, he was given a gift. A pure shard of the blood god was put into this man, allowing his anger to climb to even greater heights. The mortal man soon became an unstoppable force, ripping and tearing through all who stood in his way. He was named Doomslayer and was the champion of humanity. It is said he traveled into the warp, destroying chaos-aligned Xenos who had learned to profit from humanity's suffering. The Doomslayer even killed his own creator in single combat. Now, this is likely a legend created by scared and angry humans during its darkest hour, but it is interesting nonetheless. Other legends tell of Psykers able to control their connections to the warp, infusing themselves with the energy of light and dark, and who fought off Xenos' forces trying to capitalize on humanity's downfall. Again, this is likely a legend with a grain of truth to it, the main truth being that while humanity was predated on by the warp, Xenos capitalized on humanity's weakness, taking planets and systems for themselves. Just as the slaughter and mayhem reached a fever pitch, the dark goddess Slaanesh was born, ripping a hole in space-time known as the Eye of Terror and blowing away the warp storms. The survivors emerged, battered, confused, angry, and nearly extinct. The Unification Wars, 29th and 30th Millennium. The Terran Federation had long collapsed. The Sol system lost its empire, Earth was driven to madness, and in that madness unleashed nuclear hellfire. Few survived the disasters of the War with the Men of Iron and the Age of Strife, and those that did were twisted by what was left. Earth, once a verdant, lush, and biologically diverse planet, was reduced to an irradiated desert. Vast wastelands were only populated by rad-poisoned monsters and the bandit marauders who fought over the scraps of water and energy left. They looted the technological marvels of the past, bolting together what machines they could, only to use them in tribal warfare. The few places that did have infrastructure, that did have energy and water, became havens for the desperate souls, becoming monstrous metropolises, huddled together around a power plant or water station. The contradiction of these places being that incredible technology still available in the desperate souls clinging to life. They soon became infested, squalid, overpopulated hellholes with drugs and gang violence as the only escapes. To police these supercities, a new lawman was needed. Someone who could be judge, jury, and executioner. A man that would terrify the predatory gangs and tech punks of the city. These men were known as judges, and it was their fearsome reputation that held megacities together. An aesthetic and an aggression, these are the forefathers of the Enforcers and Adeptus Arbites of the 40th millennium. Factions vied for power and territory, making crude mockeries of the human cultures that came before. Some tried to institute republics like the Terran Federation. Some looked even further back to ancient Terran empires of old, and others simply played for factional interest. Militias were common in poorly protected regions. Techno-cults rose up to secure what was lost, and some played with abominable intelligences and genetic alteration, trying to fix the flaw in humanity that had brought them so low. The Emperor saw all of this and took pity on humanity. The Emperor saw how the freedoms of the old republics had fostered the corruption of their downfall. The Emperor saw how the toleration and treating with the Xenos had led to human genocide and death. The Emperor saw how the creation of tolerance of mutants had ravaged humanity's colonies and ambitions. The Emperor saw how religion, xenocults, and the superstitions coming out of the Age of Strife robbed humanity of what it was capable of when it relied on itself. The Emperor saw all this and wept. But once he was done weeping, the Emperor Mankind made a solemn pledge. He would unite Earth, unite the Sol system, and unite the galaxy under humanity's rule alone. Never again would aliens be allowed to tread on humanity's birthright. Never again would the mutant be placated with excuses for his existence. Never again would the lies or myths of a dark age be tolerated in his presence. The Emperor would secure the stars for humanity and guarantee the species' survival until the end of time itself. And so the Emperor began his great work. The Emperor Mankind was an immensely powerful psyker and a perpetual. This means that he could scry the warp, see the machinations of the Dark and Xenos pantheons, and could see humanity's past and its potential futures. Through human history, it is said that the Emperor prodded historical events, pushing humanity and holding it back when necessary to ensure its survival. As a perpetual, it meant that the Emperor was biologically immortal, and if killed in body, his soul would live on in the immaterium and stitch back together a mortal vessel to re-enter. In this way, he has been the guiding hand of humanity for millennia, if not for all of time. The Emperor recruited others to himself, other perpetuals, other mortals, other agents, all capable of contributing to his great project. Those that rivaled or worked against his designs were brought to heel or put in the ground, as this was too vitally important to be left in the hands of others. Knowing that the conquest and unification of Earth, let alone the galaxy, was an impossible task to complete alone, the Emperor of Mankind conducted genetic experiments to create the warriors who would help him in this great task. First, he made the Custodies. Recruited in infancy, they were tailor-designed to grow into human perfection. There were no crude viral machines here, but the intentional modification of what was already there, making warrior kings equally capable in war and diplomacy. They were 9 feet tall, physically perfect, and capable of great feats of endurance, bladesmanship, and marksmanship. They were the Emperor's personal guard and his closest confidants. Custodies took a mortal's lifetime of effort to create, had to be tailored to each warrior, and required a monumental effort to armor and arm. They could help lead the hosts meant to conquer the stars, but they could not be the hosts themselves. And as such, the Emperor looked to mass-produce transhuman warriors. To begin the conquest of Earth, he created the Thunder Warriors and gave them great weapons and armor. Adult men were implanted with viral machines that transformed their physiology, making them stronger, faster, and more rugged than any mortal. The legions of Thunder Warriors began the great work by knocking down every bastion and hold unwilling to bend the knee to the Emperor. They fought great battles against techno-barbarians and rad mutants, putting to the sword enemies of the Great Design. The Thunder Warriors themselves were formidable, great in strength and savagery, but that was a double-edged sword. They were prone to cancer, disease, and berserker rages that would slaughter innocents even after a battle was complete. This was not the great host that the Emperor would take to the stars. While his lieutenants and confidants conquered Earth, the Emperor created the Primarchs, sons who would be his generals. He gifted them with different competencies and is even rumored that he imbued them with the souls of minor gods of the warp, creating powerful connections between his sons and the forces that play on the strands of fate. Once mature, they would stand 10 feet tall, be unrivaled by any foe in the material plane, and have the wits and gifts to command great hosts to conquer the galaxy. A fellow perpetual and geneticist named Erda had contributed to the project and was prohibited by the Emperor from intervening in their creation's lives. The unity of humanity was too great a prize to be distracted from. Erda saw the fates of her sons, bloody generals at the beck and whim of their father's designs, and wished so much more for these great beings. Hoping to give a chance for her creations to thrive under their own power, she was tricked by the Chaos Gods to open up a portal and scatter them across the galaxy. The Emperor was incensed, but no great work would be without its challenges. Using his son's genetic blueprints, the Emperor created viral machines known as gene seed that could be vat-grown and surgically inserted into adolescent males. These would create transhuman warriors of great strength, speed, and intelligence, but did not have the cancer's disease or madness of the Thunder Warriors. Once a growth cycle was complete, an Astartes, or Space Marine, would then be a living incubator for more gene seed, guaranteeing his succession by other initiates. The system was perfected into 20 different variations, each templated after a Primarch, and each serving a role and temperament in the Emperor's grand designs. The first Space Marines were created on Earth and helped complete the conquest of the Sol system. The Thunder Warriors, no longer the preeminent warriors of the Emperor's armies, died to a man at the siege of Mount Ararat. Many fell in battle, but those that survived were rumored to have been culled by the Adeptus Custodes, ending the madness and danger of the Thunder Warriors. While they were a great force and useful in their conquest of Earth, their insanity and depravity could not be allowed to spread to the stars. The Emperor was not a simple tyrant and would win many more to his cause than he would have to conquer, and his greatest diplomatic effort yet would happen on Mars. The Red Planet was home to the transhuman cult of the Mechanicum. They worshipped knowledge and believed in the Omnissiah, a god of technology. It was their job to fashion and steal humanity's legacy and to give their lives to the eternal pursuit of knowledge. They saw the Emperor's achievements, his gifts, and his mission, and believed him to be the Omnissiah, truth made flesh. They would give him their ships, their Scutari and Titan legions, their weapons and foundries. In exchange, they would be allowed to continue their religion, have a monopoly on the acquisition, maintenance, and safeguarding of human technology, and be given political control of their own affairs. To gain a powerful ally and to avoid a bloody and fruitless civil war, the Emperor agreed, and the two-headed eagle of the Sol system was born, becoming the Imperium of Man. The Emperor had many goals, spoken and unspoken, but from the histories available to us, we can discern the following. The Emperor wanted to reclaim his sons and to unite a galaxy-wide human empire. The Emperor denied his own divinity. The Emperor despised the xenocults of humanity's history and the superstitions of dogmatic religions, viewing them as pits, denying humanity's potential greatness. The Emperor was aware of the dark gods of the warp and the Eldar pantheon, but told his followers to view warp incursions as another form of Xenos threat, tricks of creatures that were rationally explainable. The Emperor purged conquered worlds of their religion and made imperial worlds follow the imperial truth, that there were no gods and all was explainable through human reason. The Emperor wished to build a human webway, creating a tunnel system similar to that of the old ones, giving humanity safe, faster-than-light travel across the galaxy. The Emperor hoped to starve the Chaos Gods of their power by denying them human worshippers, and leading to a godless, enlightened, powerful, human-dominated realm surpassing all others in achievements. With these goals, the Emperor took to the stars and began the Great Crusade. Which brings us into the current timeline and the end of the episode. If you like or didn't like this idea, leave your ideas below. What properties or narratives would you add? Which ones would you take away? What new factions do you picture in your mind's eye? What new battles and technologies? Truth is, I would absolutely love to start making models, campaigns, narratives, and breakdowns around this idea, and we'll be working on it in the background. Also stand by for lore and breakdowns both in the 40k universe and in other IPs building this idea out. Like, share, subscribe, comment for the comment gods, ring the bell to catch all the new content, check out the politics channels in the description below if that's your thing, and support us on patreon.com/counterpoints or become a YouTube channel member. Support our sponsors and join the Discord to hang out with other nerds. Appreciate you. Catch you in the next one. Until the end.